Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist news and discussion out of the good old US of A. We have Victor Smith, we have our Vice Chancellor, we have myself, but we also have a special guest who would technically be our fourth YouTube not collaborator. That implies something to the French that we don't want to talk about. But one of our YouTube guests, a recent associate of mine, but I'm sure some of you know him. Lavender, who is a Bosnian YouTuber who currently resides in Germany. Say hello, Lavender.
So yeah, hello. How are you guys doing?
I can't complain. They'll get me.
Of course.
So Lavader, how did you become a monarchist, and what is your political journey been to get you to where you are?
Oh boy. Okay. It all started when I was in the womb. Actually, no. Okay, so for real, my political journey, it's been kind of crazy, but not too crazy. So to start off, I grew, as you all know, as some of you know, I grew up in Bosnia in a pretty, town, not exactly a village, but more like a small city. Okay, more of a town. And and when you grow up in the lands of the former Yugoslavia, you will always hear things like, oh, everything under Yugoslavia was great, Tito was the best, everything worked under him, now everything is, and those are basically the tales I'd say I grew up with. And I'd say I'm actually not sure at which age I started to get a lot more politically involved, but I would say I started getting politically interested at the age of either 9 or 10. And again, due to the stories and the environment I grew up in, I started identifying with Titoism. The common LARP, oh, we need Yugoslavia back, everything was fine under Tito. In fact, I still remember very much my love for Tito and Yugoslavia was so big that even my mother had to intervene, like, oh, come on, son, not everything was great about them. And I literally remember just saying to her, no, that is all lies and propaganda. Tito was the best. Everything was perfect under him. Like, due to all of these stories that were drilled into my mind, I pretty much just defended Tito and Yugoslavia like nonstop, always dismissing everything critical of it as propaganda. Because, that's what I grew up with. That's what I always hear. So that must be true. And then I guess for like maybe a year or two, maybe it was 3 years, and then around the age of 12 to 13, I pretty much just went into full LARP mode and started identifying as Marxist-Leninist. And here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing. This was around I'd say this was, yeah. Okay, yeah. I remember still, this was maybe about the ages of 13 or 14 when I was in my first year of high school, when I was, identifying as Marxist-Leninist. And there was this friend of mine who I'd say we had this quote-unquote journey together, a guy from Serbia who I also met on Discord. And we kind of, bonded over our shared belief, Titoism, Yugoslavia, socialism, and such. And then but here's the thing about this guy, like, despite him, identifying with socialism and such, he was still very much, how do I say, socially a conservative, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Like, he completely rejected LGBTQ and such. And then he was also pretty religious. And then me and him started, talking about our communist ideals and such. And then we actually agreed on writing a communist manifesto of our own communist ideology. I'm not sure. Like, unfortunately, like, the first page which my friend wrote is unfortunately lost, but I can still, like, remember the text where he stated saying, "Oh, the reputation of communism and socialism has been tainted by the legacy of Mao and Stalin." You know, these very common socialist talking points. And what our pretty much our communist ideology was about. It was basically just communism, but religious, just religious communism. That was it. Like, even though I identified as Marxist-Leninist, I was never an atheist or an agnostic. I was still pretty much, I'd say, God-fearing, God-believing. So he basically just kind of came up with this idea of religious communism. But we didn't exactly go really that deep. That was literally all, just religious communism. And this kind of just continued on for like maybe a year or so. And I still remember, so the high school I was going in was an economical high school. So like we learned economics, bureaucracy and such. And I still literally remember I dead serious once in class told my economics teacher that Bosnia needs communism.
Oh.
I mean, he was pretty chill about it. Like, okay, why? Why do you believe that? And here's the thing. Despite me, saying I'm a Marxist, Leninist, long live communism, I never even really knew what communism was actually about. In fact, I would say I never even knew what the word proletariat was. Like, I would never, like, if you told me that word, I never would have known the meaning of it. And that's kind of the thing. I just, I identified as Marxist, I identified as a communist, but I never actually knew, okay, what was I actually believing in here? Like, what are the core principles? Like, if you actually asked me, like, to, actually properly define communism and why I believe in it, I literally would not have been able to give an answer.
So it was like the rapid nostalgia from which people had so often told you had taken over, and your beliefs were not defined by actual ideas, but just the nostalgia by which you had heard from everyone else around you.
I mean, yes, that as well, but there was also, let's just say, a bit of a personal thing about it as well, like about my town. So a little bit, kind of bit of a history. My town, like during the times of Yugoslavia, there is a big factory right next to my town. It's not even that far away from my childhood home, where like basic woodworking stuff for furniture, that was basically the factory. And like the vast majority of my town during the times of Yugoslavia was employed in that factory. And life just went on as usual. The town grew. But then, during the Yugoslav wars and during and even after the Yugoslav wars, like a few years after that, the factory still functioned. But then the Bosnian government decided that they just didn't want to deal with this factory, and they basically just chose to privatize it. And the guy who bought this factory was I don't know, some random Arab guy. Just some random Arab guy just buying a factory in like the middle of nowhere in West Bosnia next to a town. And here is the messed up thing. To this very day, the factory is completely abandoned, completely rotting away, and the guy, the Arab, he still refuses to sell the factory. So even I can still remember every time I would like ride my bike like next to it, I could still see there was a security guard like at the front, like a single guy. Like he was still paying a guy to like guard the entrance to the factory, but yet he did not want to sell it in any way. And since that factory was really important to my town's, economy, it's basically going down. It's basically not working. Basically started downfall. And a lot of people, and still the vast majority of my town is very unemployed. Like people are moving out. Like I believe like today there are like only there are literally no children in first grade. Like we've reached that point where there are no new children, no new babies at all. It's literally just a bunch of old people because everyone just started moving because there was no job. The vast majority of them are just unemployed. And my town actually once tried to actually file a lawsuit of some sort to like actually get this factory at least back in government hands and away from this guy, but the courts is still ruled against it. And because we actually tried to get our thing back, but then this guy, he just didn't want to sell it. Like this private guy just didn't even want to do anything. He just waited there and just didn't want to sell it. And this basically it's basically started the downfall of my own town, my community I grew up in and loved so much. And seeing this, like basically just this guy, this private guy owning this factory and not just doing anything with it, I guess it also kind of just grew resentment in me, like towards the idea of, I'd say, private property overall. It still kind of does, I would say. This influences my economic views. Like I would never in my life, I'd say, even consider myself to be a libertarian or go all free market and cap all everything private, because I've seen what privatization has done to my community, and it basically just destroyed everything. Like even though I'm not a Marxist anymore, like everything should be owned by the state, I still would, I guess from this personal experience, I guess I would just never really, even today, identify myself as a libertarian or anything of the sorts. And I think this is also kind of what fueled that thought of younger me into like saying, "Oh, I love communism. Communism is the best."
So
And-
how did you get from there to monarchism?
Okay, so so then after some time, I guess I just kind of moved away from communism on my own, just away from it, and kind of found a new political ideology to identify with. And I am gonna give you all a guess as to what that next ideology was.
Fascism?
First try, not bad.
Oh,
Okay, so basically around, I'd say that time, like I don't even know myself, like what caused me to suddenly go from Marxist to fascist.
Well,
like,
historically speaking, it does kind of make sense, because if you look at a lot of the early fascists, they started out as like, well, example, Mussolini was a socialist. A lot of the French fascists, excluding like Marat, were socialists and communists until they then developed into fascism. So it's not exactly like completely out of the ordinary.
Mhm.
It's this kind of weird socialist to communist to fascist pipeline that people kind of forget used to exist.
Yeah, exactly. And I can still remember, like I'd say since maybe the age of, okay, wait, let me calculate. Like okay, I don't know the exact timeline, but somewhere between 14 to 15, I started identifying with fascism. And I guess I don't even know what caused me to just suddenly go over to it. Like I just suddenly braced in fascism just like that. And I'd say what's really kind of, well, okay, how do I say this? What really contributed to this journey of mine. So there was this app, maybe some of you know it, maybe you heard of it, called Amino. Maybe
I'm
some
not
of you
sure
heard
that
of it.
was a thing in the United States.
Actually,
never heard.
it was
Oh.
all around the globe. So it was basically the social media app where it's basically aimed to combine Reddit and Discord. Basically, and it was a lots of fun. It was a lots of fun, and in that app there was this community about politics, like a big giant community of everyone who had various beliefs, and I just kind of joined into it, and around that time I still very much identified as a fascist. But there is something I noticed. Like, even though I kind of talked to a few other people who identified as fascist or, were fascist leaning, the entire time, it was basically the exact same thing as Marxism. Like, why do I believe in this? Like, why? Like, if you were like I knew vaguely some things about fascist theory. Like, I knew some very vague things, but I never knew that much in depth about it. So again, if you like suddenly ask me, like, for example, okay, what is the theory? What is the Sorelian myth of palingenesis or national rejuvenation, which is a core principle in fascism? At that time, I literally would not have been able to answer that. In fact, I'm most likely to have said that isn't even part of fascism. So again, it is just like in Marxism. I vaguely, okay, I would say I definitely understood fascism a little bit better than Marxism, but yet I didn't know why was I actually believing this. Like, I actually wanted to learn more about fascism. I wanted to actually learn more about the theory, to, entrench my beliefs. But the thing about living in literally a Bosnian town is that Amazon doesn't ship there. I didn't have a credit card, and good luck literally finding any fascist book in Bosnian. So I wasn't even going to be able to find any literature, to actually learn from about fascism and fascist theory. I did have some people, again, on that Amino app who did identify as fascists, but I never really went into detail with them about these things. But again,
Oh, a question for personal clarity. Did you know English around this time, or is that something?
Oh yeah,
that came later?
I did.
Okay.
I already knew English still when I was a Tito was like 9 or 10 years old. So I already knew how to speak English and understand it, talk with people. So yeah, again, I never even knew, okay, what was fascism? Why did I exactly believe in it? Like, even to this day, I never even knew how I just suddenly went from a Marxist communist to a fascist. Like, I still don't know what happened there. And once
Lavender, I believe we lost you.
Let's see.
more, can you hear me?
You cut out for about 30 seconds.
That wasn't even 30 seconds. What are you talking about? It's like 5 at the most.
My scale of time is off. Okay, we'll compromise.
You gotta fix your clock. We've been telling you this. Fix your clock.
Okay, we'll compromise and say 29 seconds. Okay.
Okay, so can you guys hear me now?
Yes. We can.
Okay, so to conclude, I didn't really know what I was believing in, but I still kind of identify with it. And here we come to the interesting part. Around 2020, when I was 16 years old, I joined the cesspool of an app called Twitter.
Oh boy.
And again, around that time, at the beginning, I still, identified with fascism, but I believe my time there and the people I interacted with really started my journey towards monarchism. Like, to be frank, even when I was little, even when I identified as a Titoist, communist, or even fascist, I never had any strong opinions on monarchism. Like, I recognized that it was something that existed, but I wouldn't say I would be like one of those people who went, "Oh, monarchism absolutely sucks. There is nothing good about it," that sort of stuff. I never had any strong opinions about it. I would say that I was maybe kind of sympathetic, maybe, but again, I never had any strong beliefs or ideas. I just admitted that it was something that was there, that was in the world. And then it was then when I joined Twitter and started interacting with a few other people. But there was specifically this one person and a good friend of mine, very good friend of mine, who I'm still in contact with to this day, called Wolfgang. He is an Austrian monarchist, and we bonded on Twitter, and he is a guy who really knows his stuff. Like, he knows almost everything. Like, he's an excellent debater. He knows history, he knows philosophy, all of that, and he was the first one to like actually give me some insights into, teach me a bit about monarchism and such. And I guess around that time I started really just warming up to that idea, just started warming up to it. And I guess around that time I was also kind of stopping. I would say I was also starting to leave behind fascism. And I guess I started identifying more with monarchism. I'd say I was more monarchist interested. But like the exact reason as to why did I become a monarchist, I don't know
Lavender, we had a cutout issue again.
the exact of how long. Wait, can you hear me?
Now we
Yeah, we
can.
can hear you
About
now.
15 seconds. Was that closer this time, Clement?
Okay, maybe if I increase my microphone sensitivity, maybe it will be better. Okay. So where did I cut off?
You were talking about your Austrian friend. Before you get more into this, we would like to extend our thoughts and prayers to Mr. Karl von Habsburg, the head of the House of Habsburg Lotharingia, who has announced that he is battling cancer. So we would like to pray for him and his speedy recovery. Go ahead, Lavender.
Okay. So as I said, maybe before I was cut out, I basically met this Austrian friend of mine named Wolfgang, who basically introduced me to the idea of monarchism. He was like an excellent guy, excellent debater, really knew a lot of stuff about history, politics, philosophy, all of that. And he was basically my introduction to monarchism. And around that time, I started just moving away from fascism. I started identifying more with monarchism. And then that is when it once more came up. Why do I believe in this? And this is the time I actually started wondering about this myself. Like, why am I believing in this? Like, I want to dig deeper. And around this time, I actually moved to Germany with my family. And this time, I actually had access to like a lot of literature and books and resources I could actually read from and educate myself. So that's pretty much what I did. I got some books. Wolfgang recommended me some conservative monarchist literature, and I basically started reading them. This was actually the first time I genuinely started reading a book and liking it. I never really read books when I was little or when a kid. So it was like actually the first time I was genuinely invested and interested in reading a book. And I basically started reading some of these books, like, for example, The Prince from Machiavelli, Leviathan, Liberty or Equality, even a little bit of a Democracy That God That Failed, like, classical monarchist literature. Sometimes it was a bit hard for me to understand, but I guess I kind of, went through it. And I guess around that time, I actually started making sense of what I was believing in and why I was believing in it. Even like I'd say I would be able to say like why I am a monarchist today. Like I would be able to say that. And well, I'd say this was my journey. Of course, a few other things changed, like some minor political things, but I still, stayed a monarchist. And I think until maybe something changes my mind in the future, which is more than likely, I guess I am, as of right now and the future moments, gonna stay a monarchist.
All right. Well, now I kind of want to get into the specifics. So, of course, the question that American monarchists we like to get asked all the time is, who would you want to be king of the United States? I probably should have said that in a more flippant manner, but um, is there a question among Bosnian monarchist circles about who you would want? Because, of course, you guys had the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and before that, you were under the Habsburgs, and before that, the
Turks.
Ottomans.
Yeah.
So is there a lot of debate among Bosnian monarchists as to who should take over, or is there a sort of unified opinion? And what do you think?
Well, that's the funny thing. This Bosnian monarchist circle literally doesn't even exist. There isn't a single organization in Bosnia or any organized group or online that is actually like Bosniak monarchist. Like there are actually no groups, organizations, nothing of that. We are a very, very Republican nation. Like literally today, if you would go up to someone and ask them why are about monarchism, they're just gonna say the same thing. Oh, it's an outdated concept and such. Like Bosnia and Bosniaks in general are pretty strictly Republican people, and we never had and we never had this debate of who should be king because again a Bosnian monarchist circle doesn't even exist. I think I'm pretty much in the minority of Bosniaks when it comes to this.
So side question: do you prefer the term Bosnian or Bosniak, and is there a distinction between the two?
Well, to start off, the difference between Bosnian and Bosniak is that Bosnian is the term for the nationality, while Bosniak is the term for the ethnicity. Like a lot of times in the West, like for example, if you say German, German could either mean like a citizen of Germany or German by ethnicity. But like in Bosnia, because we know we have some ethnic trouble, we really just need to distinct those things. So a Bosnian is someone who is basically a citizen of Bosnia, holds a Bosnian citizenship. But a Bosniak is the specific ethnicity within Bosnia. So that's the difference. And I guess I kind of like going more off of ethnic labels. So I just generally identify as Bosniak.
All right.
Oh,
So
okay. So,
thanks for clearing that. So do you personally have an opinion as to who the king of Bosnia should be, or do you want a return to royal Yugoslavia or anything else?
Well, I can already say Yugoslavia. Oh, fuck all of that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though because I've watched your videos on this, and I'm just like, when he said Yugoslavia, I'm like, oh no, oh not Yugoslavia, no.
But I
Oh,
actually made a video about this topic on my channel, like who should be the king of Bosnia. But since then, I've actually kind of changed my mind. So when I was starting off with being a monarchist, I would say I was more of a Habsburg royalist. Like I was really nostalgic about the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Wanted the empire to return. I wanted the Habsburgs to rule over Bosnia again, and this is also something I said in my video, excuse me, about that topic, where I pretty much just stated that for Bosnia it would be the best choice if a Habsburg would take over. But now, I say now, I still, of course, like the Habsburgs. I sympathize with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but I wouldn't really call myself a Habsburg royalist anymore. But when it comes to the question who should be the king of Bosnia, I would probably say, in my opinion, it should be either. So there should be two choices regarding this. Either option number one, we actually just establish a brand new Bosnian royal dynasty. I've already advocated that it should be the Kotromanic family, not the Kotromanic. It should be the Gradašević family who should be the new royals. Basically, there was this guy Hussein Kapetan Gradašević who led a Bosnian uprising against the Ottoman Turks for autonomy, and he is widely regarded as a Bosnian national hero. And his descendants are still alive. Like they still have their own ancient estate, which their ancestor had, and the rank he had in Bosnia around that time. So I advocated. So I would say if a new Bosnian royal dynasty should be established, then we can just make them the new monarch, since I guess it makes the most sense. And then we have the second option is basically do what every what every new country did back then, just bring in a random German on the throne.
Exactly. And I honestly, I was like, is he gonna say it? Is he gonna say just bring in the random German person?
Yes.
When in doubt, just grab a random German prince.
Well-
It's just easier sometimes.
So, um, tell me a little bit about the history of how Islam came to be the sort of majority religion in Bosnia, despite it being surrounded by a bunch of Serbian Orthodox and Croatian Catholic.
Well, the story of this is actually kind of interesting. Is that Bosnians? I'm actually using this term because this is before we actually. Yeah, I'm talking about medieval terms. So this
Yes.
is in the
Yeah.
medieval times because ethnicity, like as a construct as we know it today, didn't exist back then. Basically, the medieval Bosnians, so they were Okay, so they were actually, for the most part, not even Catholic or Orthodox. So around that time, we actually practiced Bogomilism, which is a Christian sect that came from Bulgaria, and we kind of practiced it. And then later, we kind of reformed it into our own special church, so to say. It was known as the Bosnian Church, and it was seen as heretical by both the Catholics and the Orthodox Christians. And the Pope actually even launched a crusade against us as one time through Hungary, and one time even like the Serbian kings and such called for our extermination because we were these dirty heretics. But even though, like for example, the Kotromanic dynasty, which was our medieval dynasty, they were Catholics for the most part, but they never really touched that much against the Bosnian church, except the last king, Stjepan Tomašević, who did try to institute a little bit more of Catholicization of Bosnia. But for the most part, medieval Bosnians were just had their own thing, like their own Christian religion, like the Bosnian Church. They didn't really identify with either the Catholics or the Orthodox. And here is when the Ottomans came in. So when the Ottomans came to Bosnia, it was actually the interesting thing is that the Bosnian church actually had a lot of similarities to Islam. So there were a lot of theological similarities between the Bosnian Church and Islam, and then since the Bosnian Church was kind of already losing its authority, and because Islam was such a similar religion to theirs, a lot of medieval Bosnians accepted Islam instead of Catholicism or Orthodox Christianity because, again, these two religions kind of just wanted to exterminate them from day one. So, because of that, a lot of medieval Bosnians willingly converted to Islam. It is, Rock talked about that. Bosniaks converted to Islam because they were forced into it, but no, like there is actually no historical record that there was ever any like large scale persecution of the Bosnian Church by the Ottomans. In fact, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed actually even sent a document which guaranteed the protection of all Bosnian Christians and all of their religious holdings. Like this original document is still held in in the Voinica monastery. So I'd say the reason why the medieval Bosnians turned to Islam was because Islam was such a similar religion to their previous religion, the Bosnian Church, and because they also kind of saw it as a defense against both the Catholic and Orthodox world, which wanted them dead.
So, today, religiously in Bosnia, most Bosnians are Muslim, I imagine. But what's the religious? Is there any like serious religious tension between, say, the Orthodox Bosnians and the Catholic Bosnians, and the rest of the or is a thing is pretty peaceful?
Well, the thing is about today's Bosnia is that it's not only divided among ethnic lines, but also religious lines. Because it's basically saying, okay, if you are a Croat, you must be a Catholic. If you're a Catholic, then you must be a Croat, and so on with the other faiths. And so this is why such a thing as let's say, a Catholic Bosniak or Orthodox Croat are pretty much non-existent. Like, if you are an Orthodox Christian, then you must be a Serb. Like this, that's why, like, I like the only people I've seen who identify as Bosnia, like for example, are Catholic Bosniaks. They're mostly who don't live in Bosnia, like maybe in Austria or Germany. Like the vast majority of Bosniaks are indeed Muslim, but there is still a minority of Bosniaks who still identify with Catholicism. And again, the religious divide is pretty much completely connected with the ethnic divide. If you're Orthodox, you are Serb. If you're Catholic, then you are Croat. If you're Muslim, then you're a Bosniak. So I guess that they're pretty much connected.
It's very interesting that you say that because there is, like, because the Balkans are used collectively, at least, as a sort of a term for how some people view what our country is going to be going through in the future in terms of balkanization, where I don't think that the United States is as geographically distinct as your guys is, because we don't really divide on religious lines very much as a whole country.
Unless we're
Like
talking about the
like
Mormons.
well, yeah, the Mormons are a little different, but other than the Mormons who are in their own little world in Utah, the rest of the country is pretty much mixed between the different groups of Christianity, pretty much. There are some Muslim enclaves, especially in Dearborn, Michigan, but there's it wouldn't really make much sense for the United States to balkanize
Like, in my opinion, if the United States actually started balkanizing, it would be a lot more along political lines rather than ethnic or religious.
yes, which is sort of why I don't think balkanization is the best term, because, well, political lines is not nearly what the tensions in the Balkans are. It's, as you said, cultural, religious, and ethnic struggles, as well as the obvious political struggles that have occurred there. See also the bombing of Sarajevo in 1991, I think.
1992.
Okay, 92. Okay. So how, like, do you have any do any modern Bosniaks share any sort of kinship religiously with Arab Muslims in North Africa and the Middle East? Or is that sort of not a thing that is sort of recognized very much? Because you said an Arab bought a factory in your town and has basically left it to rot.
Well, well, there is definitely a lot of, I'd say, cultural mingling between Bosniaks and the rest of the Islamic world. Like, for example, especially with Saudi Arabia, since they have also funded like a lot of mosques, and there is even, I believe it's an Islamic university that was also funded to them in Sarajevo, funded and built in Sarajevo. But the thing I'd say Bosniaks are a lot more friendly, interested in like the Middle East, specifically, Saudi Arabia. but I don't really think Bosniaks have that much interest for North Africa or anything similar.
Okay. Are there any sort of like? Are you guys like? I am aware there is sort of a refugee crisis going on in mostly Western Europe. The Eastern Europeans haven't exactly been as, how do I put this diplomatically, welcoming to those refugee populations. Has Bosnia, how has Bosnia been with in terms of that refugee, like welcoming of refugees and whatnot?
Well, when it comes to the refugee crisis in the very beginning, like for example with Syria, when it was, actual genuine refugees like men, women, and children and the elderly, when they were all coming over, like we had a lot of sympathy with them because we Bosniaks know how it was like to be displaced and suffer from war. We suffered a terrible war, which we still have not even fully healed from 1992 to 1995. We had a lot of people who were refugees in Europe themselves. Like they were also scattered around European countries like Switzerland, Austria, Germany, even some other places. So I guess we sympathized with the Syrians and the refugees a lot more because we knew what it was like, because this was still very recent for us. We knew what it was like to be refugees. We knew how it was like to have our land be torn up by war. So we really had a lot of sympathy for them. But even then, during I think it was in 2016 when the crisis started happening, there weren't a lot of refugees coming into Bosnia. And they straight just went to Italy, Germany, and such. So, but it was only in recent years, like with the where the refugee crisis wasn't even about people displaced in war, but it was actually started becoming like in general people fleeing countries because their countries were shitholes, like actual illegal immigrants. So in the recent years, there were a lot of these illegal immigrants crossing into Bosnia trying to get into the European Union through Croatia. And at first, there were refugee centers. There were, people organizing relief, food. But I guess then illegal immigrants started doing illegal immigrant things. Basically, despite the fact that we Bosniaks were, their brothers in religion, like they were Muslim just as much of us, they were pretty much doing the exact same thing to us. Like, stabbing, robbing, mugging. They were pretty much doing pretty much the exact same thing. Like I can still remember it, actually, even at one point, like in Mostar, these illegal immigrants broke into a mosque, and stole things. And, as they started doing these things, the sentiment for illegal immigrants really started changing. In fact, Western Bosnia, where I was from, when I was still going to high school, I actually still saw a few illegal immigrants who were basically just waiting at the bus station. So, like my region, which is, border, we saw a lot of illegal immigrant activity. There were stabbings, there were murders. People were really just afraid to go out at night, and that's when I'd say the attitude towards these people, kind of changed for us. We realized, okay, these guys are actually doing harm to us, despite us being, trying to be friendly with them, like giving them food, and despite us again being their Muslim brothers. And I think at this experience, I started, realizing that this whole, like, a lot of, Western, like, a lot of people in the West who are, far right and anti-immigrant, they think this is a sort of clash of religions thing, Islam versus Christianity. Like when they see, these illegal immigrants and refugees, they just see, Muslims. They're doing this to us because we are non-Muslim. They want to Islamize us. But again, what we experienced was completely different. We were of the same faith. We followed the same religion, and yet they were doing the exact same thing to us. They even, again, broke into a mosque. So that's when I started realizing that this whole refugee and migrant crisis thing isn't really about religion. It's more about a clash of culture.
And it's one of the beauties of the United States over the past 200 years plus is that people have described the United States as a sort of a melting pot of different cultures, although those cultures have clashed. See the No Irish Need Apply signs and the hostility toward Germans 100 years ago, and to the Japanese during World War II, and then towards all Arabs and all Muslims in the wake of 9/11. I don't really, there has to be some sort of, you would have thought that those Syrians being Muslim would have helped them with assimilating into Bosnian culture, but I guess that didn't work out like that.
Yeah, but I would say the reason why the United States, for example, would never, despite it being a quote unquote melting pot of cultures, it it still managed to stay relatively stable, and I believe it's because of one thing. When we say, like for example in Western Europe, when we say, oh, you need to like integrate, okay, so I feel like the American identity, like what it means to be American, is vastly different from like the traditional of like ethnicity and culture. Like for example, what it means to be a German. We have a German culture, a specific German language, and like a specific, I'd say, people associated with it, and again primarily culture. But when you say American, like America, like America doesn't exactly have a quote unquote culture. Like I'd say the American identity isn't exactly tied to like your exact cultural or ethnic background, like for example German, French, British, Russian, but rather I guess it's more tied to the ideas of liberty, like the founding individualism the country was founded on. Like it's like being American isn't about what culture you are. It's I'd say maybe like the freedom, like what you believe in, being a free man and identifying with a free country. So I believe a reason is that I'd say the American identity and what it means to be American is vastly different from a traditional from what we think of as a traditional understanding of ethnicity.
Yeah, I suppose when it comes to the United States, that one of because this is the thing, religion has always been a crucial part in national identity, but our religion, I guess, has we have one. It's just that our religion is this sort of civil religion that tries to get along, or pretends to get along rather, with everyone's personal religions. And I suppose that it's not so much that Americans, we don't have a culture, because we developed a culture despite everything. I mean, you'll notice that that we have architectural styles and we have institutions culturally that are still distinctly ours. And until like the 1950s, a lot of that was actually pretty good. And then it all started to, kind of go downhill. But we don't talk about that. But
Um,
the thing is with America's culture is that the thing that bound us together wasn't any religion in the normal sense, as in a distinct profession of faith pertaining to the hereafter, um, but and divinity and all that, but rather this sort of what you said about liberty and the founding fathers, and and all that. And I think that as far as it went, that's why America hasn't really had any major conflict, because on the surface of it, we really should be killing, everyone should be at each other's throats, because you have all of these different religious groups, and then they're all essentially in each other's faces. But the American civil religion has diluted real religion down so much, in the sense that now that if there is going to be any sort of fighting, it is going to be purely on political grounds, which is sort of a downgrade. I would say, because I'd really rather not fight for the Republican Party if it came to a national conflict. Uh, yeah, I have no
So
idea what that
we
adds.
Well. To that, I'd have to say that there would have to be examples against that, like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, as they themselves both have the kind of same thing that we have, which is the original Anglo attitude, and also the mixture of different religions and cultures. And you could say even to a greater part, especially in like New Zealand. New Zealand still has a large minority of the original Maori people who still live there. Australia and Canada both are quote unquote reconciling with their former natives, including Australia, which is now trying to pass a amendment that would basically give the minority equal status, or I don't know if I would say equal status, but more power than, I guess, quote unquote, the the majority population in a way. And
um
Canada as well is also still trying to do theirs. So I would say that you do have a point with the American idea of it, but at the same time, there's other Anglo examples that aren't exactly the same as that.
I suppose the difference would be that with Canada and Australia and whatnot, they are an outgrowth of the existing British culture from the time, and I haven't really thought about this, so this is really off the cuff. That the Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders were essentially English who adapted to the specific circumstances of the time, and the English um, identity by that time was already a sort of uh, generic Protestantism, in the sense that there hadn't been, ever since the Reformation, there's never truly been a single religion in the British Isles, because the Anglicans were never truly united after Henry VIII, and there's the Methodist and the Baptist and all of that. So in that sense, it's the they sort of united around a generic Protestant cultural thing, and that's where the distinction lies with the Americans, with us, in that we specifically adopted this Jeffersonian notion of like Christian but Protestant morals, but sort of this notion of, so long as you adhere to this moral standard, whatever it is at the time, it doesn't particularly matter what you believe, which functionally it sounds similar, and I think it is. It's just that I think that the methods that we used to get there were different than that of the other Anglos. But this is really not what we brought this guy on the show to discuss. But
right. So
I'm sure that he has wide and varied insights into into the cultural history of the English peoples.
well, let's we've
Please.
actually asked all of our guests this question, and you are a guest, so you get this question too. If it were completely up to you, who would you, Lavender, name monarch of the United States of America, and why?
I'm gonna be completely honest. I never even thought that much about American monarchism or who should be uh, the American monarch, but you know, as is tradition, German on it.
Exactly.
Or
That's
actually,
what
All
I'm
right,
a
let's
saying.
Habsburg. Why not a Habsburg?
Well, I had to say, Jacobite myself and all that, but as a strong papist and all of that, I do love me Habsburgs. Um, but it's sort of a win-win considering that the Habsburgs actually did live in the United States for a while. Empress Zita was actually in she lived in New York for a brief time, and then I think she moved to Canada, and then bounced around a few places as well after Blessed Emperor Karl was essentially dry martyrdom. Um, but she, there was this, I can't remember his name, but he was some socialite or actor or something who was complaining that
Goldfuss?
he had to pick up his dry cleaning, and he was complaining to the store owner, and the store owner says, "Well, the Empress of Austria comes in and picks up her dry cleaning, so why are you complaining?" um, so I would not mind the Habsburgs if I couldn't get my glorious House of Stuart, but
The House of Stuart is dead.
yeah, the House of Stuart is dead. But if the Jacobites took over, whatever house it is at the time, right now it would be Wittelsbach. You put a little hyphen Stuart. It'd be a hyphens are fun.
Pretty soon it won't even be the Wittelsbachs.
I know, that's why I said whatever one's in charge at the time. Remember, kids, the hyphen is your friend. Do you have two names you want to run together without having to put a space bar? Hyphen.
Anyway,
It took me a minute to grasp that. Okay, my RAM is not what it should be today.
right. So, Lavader, do you have any sort of? Because I know it's getting late for you. So, do you have any sort of closing thoughts or anything you wish to impart upon us? Anything you wish to plug?
Or any questions for us, if you have any.
Actually, yeah, if you have any questions for us, yes.
Well, I don't necessarily have a question. Like, do you guys maybe have any more questions on me or want to know about any stuff I might know?
Well, if you're willing to go on for longer, of course we can. Let's see. I did have something. So, you see, this is the problem. You see, this is where it gets to me, and this isn't a you problem. This is a me problem. I think of things, but then they kind of go away. You ever have that where you think, "Oh yeah, I had to bring that up," and then the time comes to bring it up, and you think to yourself, "What was I about to bring up?" You ever have that?
Of course.
There you go. Well, I see. I gave him another question. I mean, I was trying to think of the question I was going to answer him, but it seems to have completely escaped my mind. Well, okay, let's do Europe. So are you involved, since you live in Germany? Are you involved with any the German monarchist community? I know that that's also a very small community, like the American State Department's done its work there. Let me tell you. But are you involved with any of those fellows?
Well, I have been thinking of joining the German Tradition and Life organization, which is a monarchist organization, but they're kind of dead, so I guess I didn't. Now, I'm not exactly involved with any specific groups, at least like fully established groups on paper, but I do have, I'd say, a lot of connections, especially like around where I live, with a lot of people who are monarchists and are seeking to make a difference. Like, I have contacts, I have close compatriots and friends around that, so I'd say I'm pretty well connected in terms of that. But other than that, like an actual organization, no, not really.
So do you? Let's see. So you said close compatriots. Are there a lot of monarchists around you? Like you could walk to your monarchist bud's house down the street or something, or is it more?
No. Like, of course, considering the fact I'm pretty much living in a lefty and Antifa stronghold, those things are very, very rare to see. But I do have a friend who who lives here, who we actually met on Discord, who is also a monarchist and pretty chill guy. But like the vast majority of my compatriots and friends in terms of these things, they come from outside of my city, like somewhere like maybe in the region next door, but we're still relatively close to each other where we're like 1.5 hours of train rides away from each other. So it's not that bad. So yeah.
Okay, this is going to be out of left field. What are your thoughts on public rail transportation?
Okay, if I'm okay, when it comes to that, I would like in what context?
Are you pro railway over car, or like, you know, for getting between major cities, or do you want to adopt the American nightmare that is the interstate highway system?
Your answer to this question will very much affect mine and Charles's opinion on you.
But we're not going to tell you how.
Exactly, we're not going to tell you how.
I mean, I did describe the interstate system as a nightmare, so it kind
So
of
I think
gets
you already know what both of our opinions are on that, though. So because it is.
Like, so speaking as a guy who actually uses a lot of the public transportation system, like I use the public transportation system like a ton of times. I have to say that I'd say like the whole cars versus public transportation thing, it's kind of like I guess I would say it kind of depends on where you want to go. Like for example, if I okay, let's say I wanted to go to a specific spot. Okay, let's say in Germany, I had to go to a specific spot, like let's say a village, and then I have a car. I can just take my car for like 3 hours and just completely drive down there and go to that exact spot. But if I, for example, use the public transportation system, I would have to basically board and jump like 4 other trains, wait like so many minutes, like 40 minutes for each train to come, and then go to like the rural areas and wait there for like an hour for a bus to appear. So I guess it really comes down to it. Like I guess if you're somewhere like in a city, I guess maybe the public transportation system could definitely work. But like if
So
you are,
it's a case by case basis, really.
yeah, to me it's a case by case basis because there are a lot of times where I still wished I had a car. Like for example, again, basically like this whole public transportation thing, it can really vary. Like for example, you can go with a car somewhere, like it will take much faster than you would with public transport because you're gonna have to again like jump buses or maybe even trains and then like also like go along other walks to go from one place to another. So I guess it's a case by case basis. Like I didn't have that much since I pretty much live in a pretty big city. I never had that many problems with the public transportation system, except those times when I come down to the station and the bus exactly leaves as I come down, and then I have to wait 10 minutes for another. Like, but overall, I'd say it's a case by case basis. Like, if you want to like go somewhere outside, like to a specific spot, then like cars are very much more ideal for that rather than public transportation. So for me, it is a case by case basis.
All right. Would you be willing to take questions from the audience? We have 3 audience members. Craig doesn't count as an audience member. He's just here to record. But would you be willing to take questions from the audience if they have any?
Of course. I guess if
Alright.
any of the audience knows me or stuff, wants to know more about my beliefs or maybe some other things, I would be more than happy to take questions. Since I actually never have that much.
Something I wanted to say is, I remember I watched your video on corporatism, and before I'd ever watched that video, I'd always been like anti-corporatism. I mean, I hadn't been like extremely pro free markets, but I had been still, and I guess I think I still am. And I remember I watched your video, and it completely like flipped my economic views on its head, and I'm like, am I a corporatist? And I began thinking, what is it? You said in the video you talked about some of U.S. Democrats who weren't corporatist, but like corporatist light. And I thought, am I a corporatist light?
I mean, even today, Like, look, the like as I said, like I maybe it's like basically I said I'm not very proud of that video on corporatism because I wasn't that much educated about it, but maybe you've seen the post, the recent one or not. I am planning an entirely new series regarding corporatism. Like I'm planning to do the most in-depth analysis and exploration of corporatist economics ever seen on YouTube. But in general, corporatism is, I'd say, okay, how do I word this? So when it comes to corporatism, as we so corporatism, I would say, is like an intermediary position between liberal capitalism and Marxism, making itself comfortable somewhere in the middle. Corporatism represents a third way, an alternative route to modernizing the nation that tries to avoid the disadvantages of the previous two systems. On one hand, for example, corporatism advocates for a strong guiding and directing state, but not one that is totalitarian like in Marxism. On the other, corporatism is usually characterized by state-structured and regulated interest groups, but not by total control like in Marxism, nor the complete unfettered interest group struggle in liberalism. But another interesting thing is that this corporatist method is exactly how nations, like before the French Revolution, organized their society. Like corporatism isn't something that just popped up in the 19th century. Like, for example, there is like a natural sort of corporatism.
Yeah.
Like I call it natural corporatism. Like this type of corporatism is seen in many old societies like Africa or Asia that value community and group identity over individualism. By natural corporatism, I mean the way groups like clans, tribes, or communities are central to politics and society in many parts of Africa, East Asia, and South Asia. Even in Western Europe, before major changes brought by the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and even Industrial Revolution, there were similar community-focused setups. Examples include extended families, neighborhoods, religion groups, and guilds. These corporatist structures have been around for a long time and grew naturally within their societies. But then came in, the focus on individual rights grew in the West during the 18th century Enlightenment and the French Revolution in 1789. It further pushed this idea of individualism and liberty, reducing group rights like those of the Roman Catholic Church and guilds. This shift made the individual the center of society, moving away from the old system of natural corporatism. However, many people, particularly Catholics and conservatives, miss the community-focused society and group rights of the past. Initially, they just wanted to go back to the old ways, but by mid-19th century, some thinkers and religious leaders started developing a new idea to address the social discontent of the modern industrial age. They called this idea corporatism, which gained popularity alongside liberalism and Marxism. Around that time, corporatism suggested organizing society around its main groups like families, neighborhoods, workers, farmers, business, and others, instead of focusing on individuals or, class struggle like in Marxism. These groups would have a say in economic and social decisions, and along with the government, they would manage their own members. They would acquire their own special parliament on these matters. Instead of the usual one-person, one-vote system, in corporatism, representation in this parliament would be based on groups. For example, a certain number of seats for the military, another for business, and so on. And all these interest groups would nominate their representatives. There would be quote-unquote corporations formed representing both workers and managers to help set wages, prices, and production in different industries. This way, the focus shifts from individual interests, as seen in liberalism, to group interests. It also aims to replace the class struggle idea of Marxism with a more harmonious class relationship. And again, corporatism isn't like even a dead idea. The modern Scandinavian countries, the Nordic model is based off of corporatism. It is basically formed around, I'd say maybe societal or social corporatism, and it basically works like the way I described here, like for example with the wages. Like I believe in Norway they have this system where it's like, like in Norway, Like, for example, a representative from a labor union, a representative from an employers association, like a union for employers, meet to negotiate wages, working conditions, and etc. An agent of the state is also present to act as a mediator and make the two sides compromise if they cannot reach an agreement within the deadline. This is why, again, for example, there is no general minimum wage in Norway, since that concept is stupid. So that is what corporatism really is all about, like class harmony and all these groups working together for the benefit of the nation. It's an old concept in which, again, old monarchies have worked on before the Age of Enlightenment. Okay, sorry if I went on a complete rant there, but yeah.
Oh,
No,
no,
it's
not at
good.
all.
Yeah.
Because see, this is the thing. I've heard these terms like corporatism and distributism thrown around, but at that point, all I'd ever really known was that essentially it was the attempt to bring the old order, the old feudal order, into the modern industrial age. I didn't know any more specifics of that, other than that. And yeah, that's interesting. Although one thing I did know is that most of my um, understanding of specifically as a integralist, my relationship to it was purely in the restoration of the uh, Catholic view of things with that. So I hadn't known that corporatism was a wider movement that extended outside of Catholic integralist circles.
One of the major advocates for corporatism initially, like during the late 19th century, was the Catholic Church. Like, I believe it was Pope Leo. Pope Leo forgot
The
the number. It
13th.
basically outlined, yeah, Pope Leo the 13th basically outlined this in his thing called Rerum Novarum, where he basically rejected like a capitalist exploitation and how it encompasses greed, but it also condemned, socialism and more radical views that, like, with the workers. But so he wanted to reach a compromise and, actually, get something beneficial from both of these systems. And that is why the Catholic Church and a lot of the early corporatist concepts were centered around Christian and Catholic trade unions.
Yes, well, I did know about Rerum Novarum, and then another encyclical that you would want to read for anyone who's interested in reading Rerum Novarum is, I believe it's Quantumos Annum, the 40th year, which was, I believe, Pius the Ninth, who basically, he did a follow-up 40 years later. Very creative title was his. Just call it the 40th year, I'm sure. So those are basically those are the two pieces of corporatist theory I've ever read. So there you go. I know something.
You need more recommendations, because I can really get you some more good literature and explanations on these things.
Oh yes, if you have book titles, you can DM them to me, and I'll put them in the description of the video for further reading.
Of course.
So yes, let's see. Did anyone in the audience have questions? If you do, you want to start typing them in the Friday podcast or text chat like right now, because the awkward silence is going to be very deafening in about 3 seconds.
That's all it is.
Okay, well.
Okay, so where do I view these questions?
If anyone typed them, they would be in Friday podcast or chat, which is 3 text channels up. But someone is typing. The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Oh, I love that scene.
Well, looks like there are no questions, so...
Well, that's sort of disappointing, but we had it was a good hour, 13 minutes, but unless any of you two or anyone here has any final thoughts before I go into the outro and prayer.
Yet.
No, I don't think so.
Let's see. Well, it is time for the customary outro, but well, we have a guest this time. So, if you would like to join us live for Monarchist Minute, then you can follow us. Follow us? Wow, I've been doing this spiel for how long and I can't even get it right? Then you can join us on our Discord server. Link in the description below. If you would like to see our wonderful club of tweeters, and you can follow us on the website formerly known as Twitter, link in the description below. If you would like to see our other wonderful options for getting involved in the movement, then you can follow those links in the description below. If you would like to see Lavender, okay, let's see. I was saying lavender before. I have no idea why. I can't read. I mean, I can't. I read it very.
It's a common mistake people make.
Yeah, I read. This is the thing, right? I was reading on a 12th grade level in 8th grade, but that doesn't mean that I don't overlook words sometimes. So, mea culpa. Then you can follow the link to his YouTube channel, link in the description below. So it has been really fun, Lavender, but now it is
You did it
time
again.
we what?
Yeah.
You did it again.
No, I said Lavender.
No, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
You said lavender.
I made a conscious
We
attempt.
love the smell of lavender. And
Well,
maybe he smells like that, but he is not lavender himself. He is not made of the stuff.
okay, well, I'll wait for a spin-off channel, Eucalyptus. But do you have that over there, or is that like a American? Where is Eucalyptus like from geographically?
I'm
That's
pretty
like
sure it's like
Australia.
somewhere. Yeah, Australia.
Australia.
Oh, yes, you're right. Okay, well, this has been your weekly geography lesson on Monarchist Minute. Oh boy. Well,
Oh boy.
it's been fun, but now it is time we conclude in prayer. So, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Well, until
Amen.
next week, may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.